As the Renaissance gave rise to increased opportunities for education and social advancement, not surprisingly, some people advanced further than others. The monarchies, which had successfully kept Europe in a time of relative peace and prosperity, also accrued massive wealth. As such, those with money began to purposefully align themselves with the upper rather than the lower class, and grand displays of power and wealth became the norm. The Baroque is a time when social class is again very significant. Those with money hold power over those without, and it is uncommon to change one's lot in life. Those born to nobility remained so, and those born into the working class were destined to a life of tending to the needs of the wealthy. While this sounds severe, it wasn't all bad. Males with a marketable skill could obtain a post in a wealthy household or court, and could earn a fair salary with which to support their families. Provided they continued to meet the needs of their wealthy patrons, they would likely enjoy relative high job security. Even so, skilled tradesmen, such as musicians and composers, were servants and were treated as such. J.S. Bach, one of the most renowned composers of all time, wore a uniform to work and composed on demand, according to the needs and desires of his various patrons. Let's look at a painting from this period which can give us a better understanding of the purpose of art. This is Holbein's The Ambassadors, painted in 1533, still well into what we would call the Renaissance period. Nonetheless, it expertly captures the essence of the social and cultural issues that drive the Baroque. First, it is exquisitely painted and full of detail. There isn't a single surface here that doesn't show the mark of a skilled craftsman. Look at the mosaic on the floor, the various objects on the shelves, and the lush fabrics of the clothing, the detail of the carpet. While this level of detail is definitely intended to show off the skill of the artist, it is also part of a greater cultural trend of the Baroque. Science was new discipline at this time, and it greatly influenced all aspects of culture. The use of math and science was what enabled the artist to create such reality on the canvas. In fact, the artist directly references that with these scientific instruments placed on the table. At the same time, it was popular to use these same principles to create illusion. This painting actually contains a puzzle. Look at the bottom of the picture where there's a long, sort of strange-looking line. That's actually a very stretched out skull. If you look at a very narrow angle from the right side, right down the picture, you can see it take shape. It won't be possible to do that from the screen that you're looking at right now, but here's a picture of what the skull would look like if you could see it that way. While it's unclear exactly why Holbein included this skull in the picture, of course, a skull is representative of death, and perhaps he was making a statement that even these high-birth gentlemen are human like everyone else. But we do know that stretching it out in this way is related to the fascination with math and science that was a part of this period. Artists were often just as interested in discovering new ideas about the world as were scientists, because it allowed them to create more reality in their work. At the same time, they loved to use this knowledge to manipulate our perspective, even play tricks on the eye, such as this one. At a more basic level, of course, the portrait is about the wealth of these two men, and many of the objects which are depicted are there to support that idea. There are globes and instruments of navigation, which would have been used to obtain the things like the rug, which bears a pattern that indicates that it is of Far Eastern origin. Only those with means and money would have access to such things. A reverence for learning and rational knowledge is also displayed, as is its conflict with religion. Firstly, the two men are somewhat opposed themselves, as one is in secular dress and the other is in clerical robes. This is reflected in the objects as well. There are mathematical texts displayed alongside religious songbooks. The lute, which is a symbol for a cultured life, is depicted with a broken string, which was at that time considered a symbol for discord or strife. The painter is showing the rising conflict between religion and its traditions of faith and obedience, and the younger but very compelling perspectives offered by science. Whereas we might describe the purpose of a Renaissance painting, such as the Mona Lisa, as providing insight into an individual and or his personality, the Ambassadors has a much different feel. While the subjects are clearly depicted as individuals, their social standing plays a far greater and more important role than in the past. The Mona Lisa's identity is vague. We are meant to ponder her personhood. Here, these men are defined by their roles in society, by the things they have accumulated, by their knowledge about the world and their relationship to each other. We don't get much insight into what makes them unique as a person, but we do understand clearly how they function in society. In the simplest sense, these issues are at the core of Baroque art. Artists and musicians are employed by the upper class, therefore their work serves the needs of the wealthy and is often created for the purpose of glorifying a patron. This is called the patron system, and it was the economic engine that fueled creativity in this period. Composers worked as servants of the wealthy, and they composed on demand. As Holbein's painting exemplifies, this period is heavily influenced by science and its emphasis on logical, rational thought. This was a new way of thinking at the time. Remember that the medieval period was dominated by the Church, which holds a worldview that is based on faith and on not questioning. By contrast, the basic principle of science is to question, investigate, and expand or change one's perspectives and understandings. Just as the Church influenced all aspects of life and culture in the medieval period, science becomes the guiding light and the guiding principle of the Baroque. As such, the division of society into a strict class structure seemed logical, since categorizing, organizing, and identifying things was the norm. Everyone had a title or a purpose. This social structure is called absolutism, a term which refers to the absolute power wielded by the monarchies of this period. It was believed that monarchs ruled by divine right, meaning God had chosen them to be born into the royal line, therefore they were destined to rule. This placed the monarch well outside of and even above the reach of the Church, since a member of the clergy, including the Pope, is elected rather than born into their office. Louis XIV, the renowned Sun King of France, is a great example of a Baroque ruler, and here again we can see the purpose of art as being a medium for glorifying the upper class. He is surrounded by opulent textiles, encased in a canopy of red velvet, wearing silk stockings and high heels, and surrounded by the trappings of his office. The purpose of this painting is to show his power and his wealth. So we get some social insights here, as well as an understanding of how artists functioned in the period. Fortunately, Louis XIV was a great supporter of the arts, therefore culture flourished in France under his reign. Had this not been the case, we would have far less French Baroque music to choose from today. A look at Louis XIV's palace at Versailles, well known for its opulence, also provides some important insights into Baroque culture and art. Given that tradesmen and artists serve the upper class, their work is judged primarily on whether or not it improves the social standing of their boss. So nothing can simply be functional. It must also be incredibly fancy. Everyday objects, such as furniture, are adorned with so much filigree and gold leaf that they hardly seem usable by today's standards. Look at the Queen's bedroom in the palace at Versailles. Clearly, its underlying purpose as a place to sleep is far overshadowed by the opulent and over-the-top decor. This is partly the reason behind the word Baroque, the origins of which actually refer to a misshapen pearl in jewelry making. It was used later as a derogatory statement to describe the overabundance of detail and ornamentation in the music of this period. Later, it was adopted to describe the entire era, or the period from 1600 to 1750, the Baroque. In addition to the breathtaking and almost unbelievable opulence of the palace at Versailles, we can again see the influence of science on this culture. Look at the gardens. Their concentric circles, parallel lines, and highly controlled features show not a connection between man and nature, but the power man can wield over the world when knowledge is used. In these gardens, man tames the wild rather than lives in it.